Hello and welcome into the KE Report. Chad and Corey, your hosts here today, and we're chatting with T.G. Watkins, Director of Stocks at Simpler Trading and editor of the Profit Pilot website. And we thought we'd do this as a video call today because we're going to dive in deep on the carnage and the technical reactions in the marketplace from DeepSeek that really hit the market's attention Sunday night going into Monday morning. We saw a lot of technology stocks that deal with AI and chips get hit. We saw it affect the small modular reactor stocks, the nuclear stocks, uranium stocks, and even the Bitcoin miners. So we'll dive into all of that and more here with TG Watkins. But TG, I guess first up, we got to talk NVIDIA. It was a big move. I think it was down 16.7% on Monday. How are you looking at the technical setup in the largest chip maker?
Yeah, well, great to see you guys. I love the new platform. Hope we see more of this. This is definitely how I like to talk about things and showcase stuff. So for those of you, if you're just listening to this, I'll still explain stuff, but really we're going to be showing a lot of charts, and so hopefully this will be exciting to you guys. As far as NVIDIA goes, it did break some records. It was the largest market cap loss on record, but again, it's also the largest market cap stock. So, any kind of move is going to be a big move for them. The thing about NVIDIA, looking at the charts here, I mean, we were in this upper area here, basically kind of sitting at all-time highs. And just before the weekend, we were starting to actually move up. And it looked to me like things were finally looking good, that NVIDIA had flagged long enough to finally get going. And then with Trump in here, and then having the meeting with Sam Altman and Mr. Sun and Larry, that the whole thing about AI and American dominance, all this stuff was starting to kind of warm up again. And so everything was looking pretty good. The SMH was looking good. A lot of stuff taken off. ARM was looking good. And then, yeah, the DeepSeek news came out. And first of all, it kind of seemed like maybe it was a bit of an overreaction, a little bit of a panic. Everybody like, oh my God, this totally changes the game and we need to reprice everything. And so a lot of people just, basically sold first and asked questions later, which for us as stock traders, sometimes you have to do. I mean, I got out of quite a few positions on Monday just because it's like, yeah, my break evens or my stop losses were hit when I'll figure things out later once the dust settles. But the fact that now NVIDIA has now broken down out of this trend, it is still at some moving averages, but it's really broken trend. And I think that while NVIDIA will still be a powerhouse and still be dominant, it might mean that there is now more competition coming up underneath NVIDIA because basically, NVIDIA's margin is everybody else's opportunity that they want to get in there and start, biting on their tail for what is out there as possible income for them. And if they can do it on cheaper platforms and other things, then basically other companies can start coming up and providing the AI sector. So I am a little bit concerned about NVIDIA. If you guys are interested in trading NVIDIA, SMH was looking great, and then it just got hammered again. And we don't quite know where this is yet. It's really kind of impinging upon breaking some lows and breaking trend. So everything was looking good until it wasn't, and now we need to see if this is actually going to be able to recover or if not. So the fact that NVIDIA is so big, I think, is going to have kind of an outsized influence on sectors like this because money might be coming out of NVIDIA. If they are going to be having other people nipping at their heels, they might go down, and that might have an effect on the semiconductor ETF as a whole.
Hey, fair enough, right? The narrative around AI, especially on the chip front, very well might have changed. Again, this is early on, but NVIDIA was the market leader. But if you don't need those chips, well, then it changes the narrative for them. But TG, as we're seeing in both of these charts here, looks like these drops have come right down to some of these moving averages. It looks like that you're tracking. Plus, it's still early on. So if, let's say, we flag sideways from here, what would that mean in the charts? What would it mean broadly as you're looking just to the end of this week, the close of Friday?
Well, if they just continue going sideways, it's kind of more business as usual. We have been seeing something like the SMH here. Here's the daily chart and the hourly chart. They have been flagging sideways for 2 months, 2 or 3 months. And we just finally started to see them come out and move. My indicators started firing. Everything started to say go. And then we got the news. And so, yeah, now we have to kind of let the dust settle and see if this is in fact something bad or if it's getting repriced. For the next week, we do have Jerome Powell today. We have FOMC, so we'll kind of see where that goes. I do think that these moves are technically oversold. So I could see them at least bouncing up a little bit, maybe bouncing up to their previous level or up to their underneath the hourly 50. but we don't know if that is just a retracement in what is now going to be becoming a softening or a downtrend. So it's still a little bit too early to tell, mostly because of the technical moves about this just being too far. And so we could see a bounce, and now we need to see which direction it continues after that. So we're probably going to have to give it another week at least to see really where this goes. But the picture did change. I mean, everything was looking great last week, and then this got demolished. And so I think it's time to kind of step aside and just see where this is all going with this kind of news.
Yeah, TG, it's interesting to see when there's a technical setup working in one's favor and then fundamental news like this comes out and just kind of swamps the market. It can kind of throw things on its head until things settle out. So we'll see, which way it breaks. Another interesting development though was when people started worrying about this Chinese platform, DeepSeek, kind of eating the AI's lunch in America, they started worrying about AI data centers and maybe we're not going to need as much electricity. And so one of the stocks that just got hammered was Constellation Energy Corp. It's one of the biggest utilities. It basically sold off by over 20% on Monday, had a bouncing a little bit here today on Wednesday as we record this, but as a big utility company, it had already had a huge move up, but then it crashed back down. How are you looking at something like CEG?
Let me actually go step back one thing because you just mentioned data centers. APLD was a big one. And man, this thing was looking beautiful going into the weekend. I was pretty heavily loaded up into this thing, and the news came out and just absolutely crunched this thing. I had to get out, took a hit on that. But this is kind of that thing. The narrative was that, well, maybe we don't need as many data centers, and maybe the build out of these is going to slow down. And so the repricing of this has now happened. I mean, if you look at APLD, there was lots of volume coming into it. NVIDIA was investing into it. A lot of stuff was looking great. It had trend lines. It was holding the moving averages. Everything looked fantastic until this news came out. So I was personally affected with this one. And that's the idea. Now we have to wonder, well, what does the rate of adoption for these data centers look like? Maybe we don't need as many. Maybe we don't need them as quickly. And so now this is why something like this got hit and is staying down. Again, there might be a bounce just because of a technical oversold level. But beyond that, we're going to have to give this thing some time and see actually if this is going to repair itself. So I'm out of a name like this, and we're just waiting and moving on. Going back to something like CEG, I think that, let me first start with two things here. Number one, President Trump had a press conference last week with, again, Sam Altman, Miyoshi Son, and we was talking about AI and power and generation, all that kind of stuff, and the data centers. And so that's where we got a lot of this move up here, is because the whole rollout of Trump, AI, all that kind of stuff, like, let's go. And we saw OKLO, we saw SMR, we saw NNE all explode higher based on this news. And then we saw that the DeepSeek news came out and basically stuffed it all right back in. So we're getting two different things pushing and pulling the market here. One, okay, the administration is supportive of this and we're going to go hard with it. But then, oh, the DeepSeek totally changes the narrative on this. So now we don't really know. And we've had both news events really moving these things around. On the upside, this was extreme. This was too extreme. From a technical standpoint, this move was just too much. And so then the news about DeepSeek really kind of brought it back down to where it was. It filled the gap. And you know what? You look back a week or two and it's kind of right back to where it was. And so we're kind of neutral now. I think as far as nuclear goes, I don't think the story is over. I still think that we are going to need more power, more electricity in our future, just as the world progresses, electric cars and all this other stuff. We just might change the rate of adoption or how fast we want these or how much money might get piled into them right away. And so I don't think the narrative's done, but I think it had to get repriced. Maybe not quite as exciting as it was before, depending on this DeepSeek news. We can also look at stuff like OKLO, clearly in an uptrend, still doing well, and actually rebounding very well today. Dare I say that today is proving that this thing is actually right back on track based on that news. So I'm going to say that we got whipsawed between kind of the Trump press conference, the DeepSeek news, and some of these things. I still think the narrative's there, and we just need to see if they can get back on track.
Yeah, I think it's so important to not just look at individual timeframes, also understand what was happening before that DeepSeek news, because these stocks were on a huge run. Constellation was interesting because it went back and filled the gap in a chart that it looked like it had broken out from. So that's something else to consider. Something like OKLO here, where we start to see this rebound quickly. Does it need to get back to those highs to confirm that this is rebounding and the uptrend is still in place?
I, again, this is kind of like, it's still a little bit early, but I'm going to say that the fact that Monday's dip got bought back up and we're actually now higher today than we are Monday, I'm going to say for the most part, that's actually proving that this is okay. It's just that on Friday, these things got very, very overbought. And really, from a technical standpoint, like, because a year later, we may not remember the news on what day when you look at the chart. So if you really just look at the chart, they tell you everything you need to know. And basically, something happened that pushed these things up to way too far of a price for the moment. They got pulled back, they got repriced, and as long as they continue to kind of hang out here and stay strong, they're going to be okay. It's if they start to roll over and go back down that there's a problem. But basically, it got ahead of itself, it got repriced, and now it just has to kind of say, oh, okay, I'll stay back in my lane and I'll keep going up at a more steady pace as opposed to this explosive stuff.
Well, TG, while we're talking small modular reactor stocks, let's look at SMR, which is NuScale Power. It's another, probably one of the more popular ones. It's had a rebound as well, but maybe not as epic of a move back as Oklo.
Yeah, same thing. It has a nice rebound. It is not in the same position as OKLO. That one has done very well. The other thing I would kind of say is it too on Friday got overbought. It ran up here to these outer boundaries that I use, but it also had a double top, whereas OKLO was making new highs. So, again, it ran into a double top. If you didn't know the news, you look at that and be like, oh, well, that makes sense. It's a double top. It gets pulled back. And what we need to see going forward is if this pullback actually holds and if it can kind of regain from there. It may not be as exciting or go up as quickly, but as long as it continues to hold and crawl its way back up, I'm going to still be bullish on these things. And I think that the narrative is still intact. It just got whipsawed between the Trump news and the DeepSeek news.
All right, TG, going further down that energy food chain, then uranium. Look, uranium powers the reactors for nuclear energy. Uranium stocks were a bit of a different picture where they had rebounded, but they also weren't at their highs from earlier on, a year ago or so. But again, they're rebounding a little bit. What's your takeaway from the potential shift in that whole uranium narrative?
Yeah, basically the same thing. They were looking great last week, and then the news came out, and so everybody's having to reprice, like, oh my gosh, are we going to need as much uranium as we were going to? Well, maybe not. We're still going to need it, but maybe not as much. As far as the technical stuff, and for those of you who can see the charts, this is really amazing, and this is the last time that I was talking to you guys about nuclear. This is what I said. Price came down, it's at a level, let's see if it bounces. We're going to have to see if it retests that bounce, and then using the Moxie indicator, we'll see if it goes up. So for how I trade, and this is how I teach everybody, this double bottom here with the Moxie indicator above zero is what I call a trampoline move. It's basically when price is below the 50, but the Moxie indicator is above zero. It's kind of like trying to push a beach ball underneath water, and then you release it. And you can see we actually got a really good move once we got past that moving average. So at that time, everything looked great. So from a technical standpoint, I'm pretty happy with things. Then we got the news and it got pummeled. Yes, we're bouncing again. So that's why I'm saying that this might be a little bit of an overreaction about that news. And we're just going to have to see if this can repair itself. If it can repair itself, everything I'm seeing from a technical level does say that this should be a low and we should see it start to move back up. Again, we saw last week everything looked good and the news kind of got ahead of itself, and we'll have to see where that wants to go forward. But if we look at kind of the higher time frame charts, we are at potential support. We are at major price areas, and if it can just start to hold this level and move up, overall, I'm going to say we're good. If it starts to break down from, like URNM, if it starts to break down from 40, okay, we're going to have to reassess some things, and maybe something else is going on.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting to watch how the uranium stocks move forward here after, well, all of these stocks after such a wild whipsaw market, but a lot of them are at key inflection points where we got to see if they find support and do that bounce or if there's a continuation pattern to the downside. TG, we were talking off mic that another sector that you wouldn't even think would be affected was the crypto miners. Very energy intensive sector. A couple different stocks you follow. Maybe walk us through a couple of the crypto mining stocks you follow.
Yeah, this one was a little bit of a surprise, honestly, because I figured, if you're talking about cheaper AI, maybe the graphic cards, all the things that they use to mine, maybe it gets cheaper, so maybe their numbers become more efficient. I'm kind of surprised to see that the Bitcoin miners got hit as hard as they did. Now, Bitcoin got hit a little bit. It's mostly fine. I think Bitcoin's kind of doing its thing. But the miners, I'm really kind of surprised about this. They were looking really good. Irene, Cypher, Riot, Mara, Wolf, all these things looked like they were starting to recover last week. And even Irene was starting to make new highs into Friday of last week. And then the news came out and totally repriced these things. And I don't entirely understand it, except that I know that some of these Bitcoin mining companies are kind of wrapped up in power generation. I think Hut is, there's a lot of talk about power generation with them. Irene a little bit. There must be something with Wolf. I don't understand why these things are getting hit as hard as they are, other than maybe also they're kind of a risk on sector. But again, this seemed very localized. As far as the DeepSeek thing, the whole market actually continued to do well. Underneath the surface, breadth went higher on Monday, even though the market went down. So it was really kind of localized in this area. And the Bitcoin miners got hit with it. So some of them are holding up a little bit better. You can see Irene is really just kind of back to its prior lows. Meanwhile, something like Wolf here, the bottom just really fell out. So yeah, I don't know what to make of these things until they turn around. I was looking at the monthly and weekly picture on these, and they all looked like they have been in upward angled channels and following moving averages, and volume kept coming into them. Everything was looking great, and I was really pretty excited about stuff like Wolf and Irene and Hut, kind of starting to rise from last week, and now they've pulled back. So I do not know what to say about these things other than maybe this is kind of a flush out. And if money can start stepping back into these, this might end up being a pretty good buyable area, but it's too early to see that turn. And all these charts really got changed as of Monday. So yeah, this sector is something. Again, I had to get stopped out of a few of these things, and I got to let the dust settle until we figure out what's going on with them.
So I'm glad you took a little step back there, TG, and looked at the bigger markets because look, this AI news, I think it in a way is changing the game for that AI narrative because all we're talking here, chips, nuclear reactors, uranium, mostly on the energy front, right? Including the chips. Those all got hit. But you look at some of the big tech stocks that are in AI, those didn't get hit. Those are right back even to higher levels than where they were on Monday, some even on Friday too. So is this potentially just the market shifting away from what was truly benefiting from the AI trade, not the AI trade going away, maybe just shifting momentum as to what else will benefit from it?
Yeah, I do think it's going to be a little bit of a capital redistribution. Like I said at the beginning of our show here, that NVIDIA, it's so big. Like NVIDIA is massive, and they do have a pretty big moat around them. But if this does change the narrative, investors are going to be like, okay, we're going to have to reprice this. Maybe NVIDIA is not really worth as much as we thought it was going to be worth, and we're going to have to take money out of here and let's go put it someplace else. So, yeah, this is kind of a changing and a redistribution of things. Let me show you this. This is breadth. This is the number of stocks over their 50-day SMA. And if you guys look here on the hourly chart, even the daily chart, you see nothing. In fact, it looks like it's continuing to go up. It's still a strong chart. You can't even tell that the market took a pullback on Monday. And that was kind of the thing that I was noticing is that around the market, everything else actually kept doing just fine. It was just this sector of AI and chips and energy production, all that kind of stuff. It kind of reminds me when, the CEO of NVIDIA came out and said that the quantum computers were still 15 to 20 years off, and you can see that the quantum computers totally got hit. And so here's IonQ as kind of leader of the quantum computer sector, and you could just see we had a massive drop on that thing. Amazingly though, here's your level, look at the bounce, and they're not that bad off. So we are right now in the middle of this range, and we need to see if this area is going to hold. And if it can hold, we can go back up. If it's not, then we see them break down, and that's kind of right at that middle spot. This also kind of reminds me, if we use FNGU, this is the leveraged ETF of the FANG stocks. This kind of reminds me about the yen carry trade. If you remember, we had all the FANG stocks just running up huge, kind of like the quantum computers, kind of like the nuclear stocks, kind of like AI. They got totally decimated because everything had to get repriced. And then look what happened. They started to oscillate, got back to kind of this middle ground, and look at them. Now they're higher again. So this is why we're mostly just talking about the rate of adoption or having to reprice. Let the dust settle. People need to, like, cooler heads need to prevail. They need to see if this thing is really legit because it is Chinese and, it has, some people have said it's been proven. But I think that now that the news is out there, we really need to assess this and see. And then I think for the most part, a lot of these sectors will still be on track, but man, they certainly got repriced.
Well, I think we'll wrap it up there for today, gentlemen, but they absolutely did get repriced, and it's going to be fascinating to follow up with you in a couple of weeks, TG, and to see what the charts say then. We really appreciate you walking us through all these charts. It was actually fun to rapid fire through different sectors here, and it was a big week in the market so far, so we'll see how it closes up for the week. But if people like this and want to see more of TG Watkins, definitely click on the link below this interview. It takes you over to the Profit Pilot website where you can follow along with TG's analysis, and he talks to subscribers and does charting like this for them very regularly. So appreciate you weighing in on the TA front, TG, and looking forward, as always, to our next conversation.
Great. Thanks, guys.